A lot of people were taken surprise last year with the Nexus 6 just because it was attached with a premium price point, whereas the handset before that, the Nexus 5, was billed as an affordable smartphone. Well, luckily this year we have again an affordably priced Nexus device, and hopefully this one will stand out in the sea of these low-cost premium phones. Hey guys, John V from PhoneArena here. You're watching our video review of the Google Nexus 5X. What's arguably the most attractive thing about the Nexus 5X is its starting cost of only $379, and with that, you get a reasonably spec'd smartphone. You can tell though, the design is kinda on the dull side. That's expected considering that there's so many constraints in building a phone of its price point. It's an all matte plastic variety closed design. It's lightweight and pretty compact, but the overall package is a little bit on the boring side. But like I said, that's kinda expected. It does come with a useful fingerprint sensor in the back, which is used in conjunction with Android Pay and also to unlock the phone. And it works pretty fast too and super responsive as well. You could also unlock the phone when it's in standby mode. So when it's completely off, you just place your finger over the sensor and it unlocks it for you. And of course, you also have the pure Android experience, which means that it'll get updates faster than some other phones. They didn't skip out with the display either. It's a 5.2-inch 1080p IPS LCD display, and there are several favorable qualities with it, especially considering its price point. You tend to get some really low quality displays with some really cheap phones, but this is a pretty good one. You have a 6800 color temperature, a gamma value of 2.31, and it's also pretty potent at 487 nits. So when it comes to outdoor visibility, no problems whatsoever. It also offers superior color accuracy in the sRGB color gamut chart. It produces some realistic, true life color tones, and the overall package is pretty sharp and vibrant. Out of everything though, the Nexus 5X is most notable for the fact that it's running Android 6.0 Marshmallow. So it's the latest and greatest in terms of Android. And it does come with some new exciting features, but most importantly, seeing that it's a Nexus device, it means it's going to get updates significantly faster than other phones. So if you're all about having the latest experiences, this is the phone for you. Now, in terms of the visuals, there are some minor changes to the UI, but they're mostly subtle. And for the most part, it kind of follows in the same premise that that's already established with material design in Lollipop. But there are some new exciting features that we're going to talk about here. The first one here is going to be the contextually aware Google Now on Tap feature. So it complements the Google Now feature that we all know and love. So basically, whatever you're doing, if you hold down the home button on screen, it's going to scan whatever we're viewing on the phone. And from there, it's going to provide us with some relevant information. So for example, if you're in your calendar and you have an appointment and use the Google Now on Tap feature, it's going to scan it and it'll provide us information pertaining to the address, the location, even the meeting itself. So pretty useful. The second thing here is the quick camera access. So even when the phone is completely turned off, you double press the power button and quickly launch the camera, so you'll never miss a moment. And finally, there's also ambient display. It's not really a new feature per se, but still a pretty useful one. So basically, when the phone is off and you pick it up, it'll display useful things like the time, date, and even some notifications. We're also pretty astounded by its solid all-around performance with the hexa-core 1.8 GHz Qualcomm Snapdragon 808 chip with 2 GB of RAM and the Adreno 418 GPU. It's not the latest and greatest from Qualcomm, but nevertheless, it shows its strength. Just because it handles basic tasks with ease, there's a fair amount of responsiveness, and it opens up apps relatively quickly, and we could multitask between them pretty fast too, so very few times it actually slows down. On top of that, it also handles graphics processing as well with its GPU. In fact, it's on par to devices like the Note 5 and G4, which is pretty impressive on its own. Don't worry, you have a versatile camera that's very much adaptable to the conditions. So on the back, you have a 12.3 megapixel sensor from Sony with an f2.0 aperture lens. You have a laser autofocus assist and has even the ability to shoot 4K video, which is nice. Around the front, you have a 5 megapixel camera, so the whole package is quite formidable. In terms of the shooting experience, it's all done via the Google Camera app. Now, many of you are going to be familiar with this, but it just leaves more to be desired. You have only a few shooting modes at your disposal. such as photosphere, panorama, and lens blur. It just lacks the manual controls that we're seeing more and more in smartphones nowadays. So for enthusiasts, that might pose a problem, but at least it's a straightforward experience. As for the quality itself, you won't be disappointed because it takes some great overall shots, though when it comes to details, it tends to have this over-sharpening effect in its shots, so that's something that stands out. And does decently to handle dynamic range, but at times it seems to overexpose certain areas. Luckily, the HDR mode Plus does a good job of offering a neutral exposure throughout the scene without applying too many artificial qualities in the process. It even handles indoor situations where there are conflicting light sources, just because the white balance seems to be pretty spot on. You get some realistic color tones, though a little bit on the warmer side, and it also performs pretty good under lower lighting conditions. There's minimal noise, which is nice. You still have good color reproduction, though details tend to become duller. It's not bad, it's actually pretty good looking in the overall package. As far as video recording, you won't be disappointed either. You have 4K or 1080p at your disposal. Of course, with 4K, you can get more detail capture, but it tends to be slower with its focus adjustment, and there is no stabilization whatsoever offered by it. As you can probably tell, it has a new USB Type-C port, which replaces the traditional micro USB we're used to. Now with this, it's able to have a pretty fast recharge time. It only takes 100 minutes to get it back to full capacity using the included charger. Now the problem with the Nexus 5X is that it only comes with the USB Type-C to USB Type-C connection cable. So if you want to connect it to a traditional USB port, you're gonna have to purchase an additional cable or an adapter, so you're gonna go from USB Type-C to USB Type-A. So that's a problem itself. As for the battery life, it's just average, and in our battery benchmark tests, it achieves a mark of 6 hours and 25 minutes, which is, of course, right there in the middle of the road. It's not really long. In our real-world usage, it's able to give us at least 1 day of juice, but it's something you're gonna have to recharge every night. Nexus devices are highly coveted, there's no arguing about that, but we have some concerns with the Nexus 5X. The first one being that there's no expandable storage. You're only given either a 16GB or 32GB option, and that's it. So if you're going to be doing a lot of 4K video recording, you're better off going with the 32GB option. Secondly, you have an underpowered internal speaker. Now the speaker is below the display, it's projecting audio towards us, which is nice, but it's pretty weak with the maximum output of 69.2 decibels, so it's kind of on the dull side. And the headphone jack too emits some weak tones as well. It's not really ideal for audio. Also a little bit disappointed by its subpar call quality. Specifically, there's just too much scratchy sounding voices on both ends of the line. So through the earpiece, voices tend to have a scratchy tone as well on the other end. And it doesn't help either that the speakerphone itself is also underpowered, so in noisy environments, it tends to drown out. Well, it's pretty rewarding and refreshing to know that an affordable cost is associated again with a Nexus device. At $379, the Nexus 5X offers incredible value considering you have a high quality display, you have a pretty solid performance out of the Snapdragon 808, you have a fingerprint sensor, and a highly versatile camera that's adaptable to various shooting conditions. And best of all, it's the stock Android 6.0 Marshmallow experience on here. And seeing that it's also part of the Nexus family, it just means it's going to get updates a lot faster. And for some people, that is crucial. Now we got to talk about some of the competition out there, because this year we've seen a handful of low-cost premium phones that offer also incredible value. We will certainly say that the Nexus 5X has more value than, say, the OnePlus 2, but when compared against the Moto X Pure Edition, it makes for a tougher offering. So essentially, it's just going to come down whether or not you like its size better than the Moto X Pure Edition. You do get that stock Android experience, and it's still pretty well-rounded for a phone of its price point.